My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, and today we have Amritha Shakti, who is an Australian Tamil songwriter. She was born in Chennai. She struggled with kind of the concept of home for a long time, but incorporates her love for her roots and her music and beyond. And she uses her, talents as a singer to talk about issues that are common to children of immigrants. She started learning Carnatic music from her mom at the age of 4. And as she grew older, she taught herself Hindustani and Bollywood vocals before discovering her love of soul, jazz, and the blues in her 20s. And you kind of see that in her music as well. And on her website, she describes herself as a hippie with an MBA, which I found super interesting. So without further ado, why don't we let Amritha kind of introduce herself? And Amritha, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your upbringing, your family, and we'll kick it off like that.
Yeah, thanks, Lara. I'm really happy to be here with you today. So I think you touched on what is perhaps like the biggest part of my identity. So I was born in Chennai, and my family moved over to Sydney, Australia when I was like 3 years old. So this was like in the 90s, and I think like the whole immigration wave, especially from the South Asian subcontinent, it was like, it's pretty new. So it was really interesting growing up in that time where you're kind of like, you almost live in two different worlds. Like you're like, you come home and like, it's like mini India. It's like your mom cooking like sambar and your dad playing like Yesudas Carnatic music and like just talking in Tamil, and you're like, okay, so this is, okay, all right. And then you step out and it's like a whole other world. And I think there was another element of it where it's like, it's a whole other world, but that world outside is so incongruent with the world inside. And it feels like I'm not being accepted in either fully. And so I think a lot of that comes through in my music. I think music was always a way for me to like see that there is a congruence and that it doesn't have to be like me fitting into one or the other. And it's kind of like me creating something that is my own identity. So you touched on it really well when you said it was like my roots, because I think a big part of it is like, I love my Indian heritage. I love like my culture. I love being Tamil. But I'm also like, I grew up in Australia, and it's like, okay, like this is a way for me to bridge those two worlds.
As you were talking, for whatever reason, we've never actually connected over like a conversation. We've always connected digitally. And for whatever reason, I expected like a very heavy Aussie accent, as I'm used to like when I talk to other people. But you actually sound more American/Canadian. That's interesting. Is it because you spent more time like away or abroad?
Yeah, I like moved out when I was like 23. And then I moved to New York, and ever since then, I feel like I've just been around Americans. And like, also, I feel like when I moved, I found really corny. I found who I was. And so that made a huge impression on me. And I just like woke up a year later and I was like, why am I speaking like a New Yorker? This makes no sense. It never went away. It was like ages ago.
Are you back in Australia now, or are you still in New York?
I am back in Australia, yeah.
Okay, awesome. In terms of like your, I guess on the music side, like I asked this question to a lot of people in the creative arts because people like to obviously have labels and put people in a box, but do you consider yourself like strictly a musician, or, are you like a storyteller that your medium happens to be music? How would you kind of describe it?
It's so interesting. I feel like I never identified with the word musician. I literally just say it to myself like this. I'm like, I sing, and like, that's it. Like I feel like any other label beyond that doesn't feel genuine to me. It's just something I do.
I see. So do you like, other than, because I know when I speak to like creative folks, I say that because I'm not creative. Some people say I am, but you do music, but like, do you do anything else as kind of a creative outlet? Do you like write? Do you, I don't know, paint, or like something else that's creative outside of just music?
Yeah, I feel like there's a whole creative side to me. Like I love writing. I love like even the concept of just like speaking and connecting with people. Like I feel like there's a creativity in being able to like listen deeply to someone and talk about their like life and their purpose and their vision, all of that stuff. Like, I feel like there's a whole other side of me that's like all of that in that creative bucket.
Got it. Okay. And I know there's kind of like an analytical side to you as well. I mean, maybe I'm just assuming that because of the whole MBA thing, but on your website, it's very prominent and it was like obviously very catchy because I still remember it, where you describe yourself as a hippie with an MBA. So, why like I guess pursue an MBA if you're so passionate about music?
It's such a good question. I have a really strong sense of purpose that like I wanna work in India, in like the development field. And that's always been something that I've been very passionate about. And I always see that as like, that's why I'm here. And I think music it's like something I love more so than it being a purpose. And I kind of struggled with that a little bit. Like I felt a lot of guilt when I was like comparing myself to other musicians who would be like, oh, like I live and breathe music, this is it. And I'm like, I love music, like it's freaking awesome and it makes my life sweeter and lovelier and awesome and it's just so good. But like, I also love this other thing that's like who I am. And so I think I've finally just sort of accepted that like there's a multitude of things in me that like make me feel alive and maybe I don't have to choose one over the other. And it's been interesting trying to wrap my head around that.
So in terms of like, I don't know if you're at a crossroads right now or if you've ever been at a crossroad where you've kind of heard it from other folks, but did you ever have to make a hard decision on, do I completely go all in on music or kind of on this developmental path like that you described? Or is there a future where you think you can comfortably balance both?
Yeah, I think the only times I've ever wondered whether I should go like all or nothing is when I allowed other people's opinions and beliefs to kind of mess with my own mind. Like I think I always knew like I function the best when I have both. Like when I'm doing like strategy and like all of that stuff, and when I have that space to also be creative. Like I actually physically can't just do one thing. But I think it was very easy to kind of like lose that knowing, that self-awareness when the voices you hear around you are like, oh, you're not going to get anywhere unless you focus on one. And then there was just a point in my life where I was like, you know what? Like, it's just about my joy. And I choose like my joy. And my joy comes from like doing these few things really well. And I can balance it. So I'm just going to go down this path.
So how do you fit music? I mean, if it seems like obviously you work like a job related to development where I imagine it takes up a good chunk of your week. How does your week look? And like, so how do you fit work in and how do you fit kind of your passion of music as well?
I think I'm really blessed right now because I'm in a role where like I'm doing what I want to do. So I'm working in strategy for like a social enterprise, but we're like a completely flexible organization. So that basically means like I've been really obsessed with this concept of flow state and like how it's just sort of like, don't force yourself. Like 9 to 5, you don't have to just be like, oh, like I need to do the 8 hours because they told me to. It can literally be like, you know what, 9 to 12, I'm doing strategy. It feels right. I feel inspired. I feel amazing. And then towards the end of that, if I start to see the energy kind of like drift away or like kind of not be in that activity anymore, I'll like switch. And I might like jump onto Beat Stars and like just spend half an hour like ad-libbing over a beat. And then I get my flow state back. And then like I think that's how I thrive, is like kind of following where the flow is in different activities. I forgot your initial question, but I hope that answered it.
No, I mean, that was interesting because I was just thinking in my head as you were speaking about flow state because I'm the same way. I'm glad. I think COVID was a good thing in the sense around work where being present meant that you were working, but really, I've been working from home for a while, even before COVID, and it's not really about being present. It's like, if somebody can do something that's a difficult problem in an hour, that might take somebody a week of
Totally.
being in the office. Still, I'd rather have that person who can kind of manage their time or know when they're productive versus someone that just sits there because somebody tells them to sit there. So I love,
100%.
I love the self-awareness that you have. So that's kind of what I was thinking about as you were talking. Yeah, I forgot the person who termed that phrase flow, the Philippine or
I
whatever.
can't say his name.
He's Russian,
It's like
right?
Mihai, yeah, Mihai
Yeah,
Csikszentmihalyi Mihai or something like that.
yeah, because like 1 or 2 hours of deep work is like the equivalent of, I don't know, depends on the person, but like maybe 10, 15 hours of like
100%.
mediocre like flow states. So yeah.
100%.
How,
Yeah.
how, how do you put yourself into the flow state? Like, do you have a quiet space? Do you have a routine, or how do you kind of do that?
I think there's like two ways you can hack it. I think the first way is internal. So like just going purely off like intuition. And then you build that ability to like tap into your intuition through like meditation or like any sort of inner work. And then the external thing is you can kind of trigger it using like something like the Pomodoro technique. You know that technique where you kind of like 25-minute timer.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And then like play like some sort of music that isn't like lyrical. So your mind isn't trying to figure out what's going on. It's just sort of like a binaural or like whatever, like a classical jazz, whatever it is. And then in that 25 minutes, something happens, especially if you're like you enjoy what you do. It's like the level of insight and the level of progress you can make in that 25 minutes is probably equivalent to like 2.5 hours of forcing and trying and I have to do this. So those are like two things I'm like playing around with.
And I think setting internal deadlines, like even if you don't have like a hard deadline for a task, just setting like a deadline, like I have to go for a walk at 2 o'clock, so I need to get this done by 2. Also, I think helps me kind of get into flow state because I know I
Yeah,
can't like fool
yeah.
around. In terms of, I guess, music as well, who's an artist that you would love to kind of collaborate with, or like someone that you look up to?
Oh man. First person that came to mind this changes like depending on when you ask me, but first person that came to mind was Jhené Aiko. Um, and the reason she came to mind was I think she's doing some really cool stuff at the moment. Um, Using like sound healing and like Tibetan singing bowls and things like that, like and more kind of like these like spiritual concepts and like weaving it into R&B. And that's something that's like really it's kind of groundbreaking and it's something I'm like very naturally drawn to. So that's probably that would be like a dream collaboration. That would be insane.
Do you consider yourself spiritual or religious?
Um yeah, I think it's a big part of like who I am and the level of peace that I feel like I'm experiencing on an increasing level each day.
Got it. Do you, I guess when I talk about spirituality or faith with people that are, I guess, my goodness, what's the term? They don't, I guess, oh my gosh, I can't remember the term, but they don't believe in anything. Is it agnostic? No.
Atheist?
Atheist, that's it. Um, they find it weird when, because I consider myself logical, but like they're like, how can somebody logical believe or have a faith like that? How do you ever get questions like that, or and how do
Oh
you
my
answer
God.
them?
I seriously think believing in a higher power is the most logical thing that you can do. I was thinking about this the other day. It's like you just think about like the intricacies of life. Like for me to be sitting here in front of you from Sydney, you're in Toronto, right?
Yes.
And like just think about like every single thing that had to come together to make this moment happen. And it's like, how do you that's beyond rationality. Like there has to be something that puts it all together. And I don't know, it just feels like the most logical thing actually to believe in that there is like a deeper thing that kind of brings us all together and has made all of this happen. And also I would rather be like illogical and believe in something that gives me a whole bunch of peace and makes life feel so much more magical than logical and deny myself an existence which is full of that magic.
That was a great answer. I love it. I think when you talk about your music, and I think you have this cool 1 minute and 30-second video on YouTube where you kind of talk about your story. Part of your story, and I think you mentioned it earlier, was kind of feeling like the other, like someone that didn't quite feel like they're Australian or yet Tamil slash, I guess, like from India. Um, Was there like a defining experience that you had in your childhood in Australia where you kind of, definitively felt this way and you can still remember that moment? This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
The thing is, as you asked me that, I don't think I ever felt like I belonged. Like, I don't think I ever felt that way. And I think it was a series of things growing up. I was like, the usual story. Like, I was like one of like 3, I think, brown kids at primary school. And it was just weird. Like, there was just always this like strange underlying thing of like, oh, let's put the 2 brown kids together. Oh, like, and it's these weird, I know they call them microaggressions, but I don't want to call it that. I think it's this kind of this subtle sense of like, oh, okay, like in even these small activities, I feel like I'm not part of it. Like I'm not part of the bigger group. And you just internalize. I just internalized it over time. And I think the more I internalized it, the more I kept seeing it. That whole thing of like, you see what you like believe. So I just kept seeing it happen, and it just kind of like drove this weird wedge between me being able to fully identify as Australian. Like even today, I struggle with that a little bit. I'm like, am I though? And even if I identify as Australian, like what's the guarantee that when I step out today, someone's going to be like, no, but where are you really from? Like, it's just such a painful, there's still a lot of confusion and pain, I think, in the way I identify and like my Australian identity.
With your friend circle in Australia, how do you find it to be very South Asian centric, or like do you have a good diversity of friends, or like what's your friend circle like?
I think it's very South Asian. It's very South Asian. And I know I did that deliberately because I didn't feel like I belonged in the mainstream. And so all through high school, I'd be like, I can't wait till I go to uni and I have a group of like brown friends. And then when it happened, I was like, oh my God, I feel amazing. I'm like, everyone. Like, it's so interesting. I think these days it's changed a lot. Like I'm friends with like all sorts of people like from different ages and backgrounds and all of that. But I think I kind of needed that earlier to feel some sense of community and belonging.
Got it. Within like your support circle, did you ever have more people pushing you towards one direction or the other? Like the reason I ask is like typically it's maybe more from the like our parents' generation where they never saw the creative arts as kind of a viable career option. And obviously like at your MBA, you have a job that, that's something tangible that people can kind of understand if you described it, versus if you tell them you're like into music or you sing, they're like, okay, great, cool. Now when are you gonna get a job? Like, what kind of sentiment do you hear when you talk about music and your passion for music within, I guess, people your age, as well as, I guess, people like your parents' age or your parents?
I actually don't think like our generation is that different mindset wise. I think there was still a lot of judgment when I first was like, I want to do this more seriously. There was so much judgment, and I didn't expect that from like my peer group. Like I expected it from like uncles and aunties, and I generally don't care what uncles and aunties think, but I cared about what my peer group thought. And it was weird that mentality just kind of carried over. It was like, oh crap, really? Oh, musician. Like it was everything you would just hear from like the older generation, just in an Australian accent with my peer group. That's it.
Oh, interesting. I would have I've heard mixed answers to that, so it's interesting, I guess. So are a lot of your friends work more traditional jobs, or like have more traditional viewpoints on things, like what a job should be, what you should do?
And even I think like when you're asking me about like the MBA, I think there was a struggle for me even with that, because I didn't go down the traditional path post MBA. Like I didn't go into like investment banking or like any of that stuff. I literally moved to India, and like that was like, oh, we're moving to India. Like I think you're always gonna get that group of people who are just like, you're so weird. You're not following the thing that I'm doing. And I think what underlies that is that it brings out a discomfort in them. Like it challenges their their decisions, because more often than not those voices are the voices of people who refuse to listen to their own inner calling or whatever it is. And so I think I've just learned to literally just stonewall, just block out anything from anyone, which may or may not be a good thing, but it seems to be working.
I think it's a good thing. I think it's important to have alternative viewpoints or like people that kind of give you the other side. But at the same time, if you have a dream and like a certain thing you want to do, too many negative voices could be a bad thing. So I definitely agree to some point. As you've kind of, I guess, got older, I guess with respect to friends, the topic of friends, something I'm curious about is, have you seen your circle of friends kind of get smaller and like closer, or like, and like, yeah, how have your friendships evolved over time?
Definitely like a lot smaller of a group. And I think I'm also a lot more like selective with like who I spend my time with, because I don't know, maybe I think it's just a natural process. Like you get to know who you are more and more as you get older. And then you're like, okay, like I think I was only hanging out with XYZ person because I wanted to seem popular. I wanted to seem liked. But but those relationships didn't really make me happy. And so then it's just almost this like, all right, well, what makes me happy? Like which of these relationships is there like joy in? Like you just like Marie Kondo your life a little bit. You're like, this is friendship bring me joy. So I feel like it's like a small group, but even like my concept of friendship is changing, because like when you're like constantly changing, which I feel like I am, like I'm constantly like, oh shit, oh wait, I don't actually think that way, this is who I am. Suddenly like everyone around you, there's a shift in the way that your relationship feel as well. So I think I've kind of let go of just that like that friendship concept, and I kind of just think of it all as like relationship to different degrees, and like how long someone stays in your life is just how long it's meant to be until it's no longer feeling right for either one of you. Does that make sense?
No, it makes absolute sense. It's just I think you're making it sound so like easy. So it's like, I guess because you have, like, you eloquently kind of described what I think a lot of people have trouble with. Like, the classic situation is when you have friendships with based on history, and then kind of, because you have like the sunk cost of time spent with this person, and now you don't want to kind of let it go. You find it difficult to let it go. Or if you do let it go, it's like a very painful thing. So I was just kind of curious about kind of your own experience with that, especially specifically like the friendship with history, because I mean, friendship at the end of the day is built on history, but like you said, at some point, as you change, where you spend your time changes, and therefore the people that you might find interesting or spend a lot more time with changes and reflects that. So I was just curious about that. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like if you like orient everything around doesn't make me happy, things change. And it like I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like as like children of immigrants or as people from the subcontinent, like we never really were taught to think that way. Like when was the last time someone sat you down and was like, hey, are you happy? Like are you like when was the last time I did that? It's only recently that I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm entitled to live a life that gives me joy. Like how revolutionary. And so I think the moment there's like a mindset shift there, the moment that becomes your metric for success in life, like everything changes. Like suddenly everything actually becomes a lot more black and white. And again, I don't know if that's a good thing, but it feels good. Like I'm happier.
I was going to ask you because you said happy and joyful. I consider those two different things. Tell me if you
Interesting.
agree or disagree. I think happiness is kind of like what normally people associate with kind of, positive, just, it's just something that makes you feel good, or I don't know how to exactly describe it, but I feel like joy is you still feel good even in the absence of, you could be sad or like something devastating can happen, but you
Thing.
still feel, I guess I use the word joy in that context, but I don't know if maybe I'm using it incorrectly, but that's how I think of it. So
I like that.
it's almost like a stoic view where like, like bad things do happen. It's like, what's the saying, pain is a part of life, but suffering is a choice. So I guess similarly, that's what I'm
I
kind of
like
thinking.
Yeah, it's almost like when you said that, I thought of the word fulfillment with joy. Like you can live a really fulfilled life, but still have like a bunch of crap that you have to go through. But because inside you're just like, yeah, but I'm on purpose and I'm living in a life authentic to who I am. You just feel better equipped to deal with everything.
Yeah, and I think also someone like you sound like you're as well. Like when you have goals and you're kind of ambitious, not like you want to take over the world, but you just have kind of goals and a certain life that you want to live in. I feel like it's very foreign to a lot of people when you kind of talk that way. And so it's just kind of, you inevitably kind of go through more suffering than somebody that's like, not as ambitious. And I don't know if I'm like dumbing it down, but like they want the simple life versus what you're kind of envisioning for yourself. So, anyways, that's just kind of um, something that came to mind as you were talking. But I guess back to the topic of music. In the independent Tamil music scene, at least from like Australia, or like from your perspective there, are there any names that you kind of see either in Australia itself or like just anywhere in the world that kind of excites you or like, yeah, like you're like, hey, you know what, this person's going to do great things. Anybody you particularly can think of?
So many. I think my three at the moment are like Priya Raghu. Like these are people I just like look up to and really, really admire. Like Priya Raghu, which I think you spoke to her in the
Yes.
last episode.
Yes.
Um, Sean Vincent DePaul, mastermind, like just incredible. And Nav's 47.
That's a good list. They've all
Oh,
done huge things.
incredible human beings. Yeah.
So like outside of like work and music, I know music is part of your fun, but what else do you like to do for fun?
It's a terrible question to ask me. I'm really bad with fun. Well, before COVID hit, I was like obsessed with travel. Like that was my way of just like solo travel. That was the only time in my life where I wouldn't plan anything. Like I would just show up in a country and just be like, boom, let's go. So I think I'm kind of struggling actually with like what is fun when I'm not doing that, because that used to be like my go-to.
What's like a place that you've been to that you like absolutely loved and like you'd love to go back there like 30 times if you could?
I literally used to go back to Bali every year.
Oh,
Like
I love Bali.
every
Yeah.
year. It's freaking on. Have you been?
Yes, we went to Bali and we stayed in a place called Canggu, which was kind of like less developed when we went, which we liked. It's been like 2, 3 years, so I imagine like Bali, just like the rest of the island, has been heavily developed by the Australians. A lot of Australians in Bali.
Yeah, apologies on
It,
that.
is it
Yeah.
because is it because it's like a short flight? Like how long is a flight from Bali to Australia?
This may not be right, but I feel like it's the closest Asian country. And like, especially if you're living in Perth, it's just like a few hours and boom, you're in
Oh,
Indonesia. I
wow.
don't know about being in Bali, but you're in Indonesia.
So you could do like for like a weekend trip. You could leave like on a Friday afternoon or something, and
Yeah, like a long weekend trip.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. Okay, and like you said, you did when you did traveling, you did a lot of like last minute places. Like, where's one place where you might have had lower expectations? Like some place you're excited to go to, but some you're kind of obviously just doing it, and you might not be as excited. What's one place where you had low expectations going in, but you came out with your mind blown? Like, wow, that was way better than I thought it would be.
Probably Austin. I was there a few years ago for like one of my really close friends' wedding. I was in Texas. I was in Houston. And then I was like, you know what? I should check out Austin. Real low expectations. Like I've heard they have like a really good music scene. Let's just see what it's like. And I showed up and then my mind was just literally blown. Like, I don't think I've been to like such a musical city in like such a long time. Like they would turn like fast food chains. Like there was a fast food chain restaurant and they had shut down half of it and turned it into like a live gig. And there were these two artists that were playing like, I think it was like American bluegrass / country. And I was just like, oh, this isn't really my genre. But I sat there and I was like, it was over. I was like, these people are so talented. I'm in love. This is amazing. And everywhere you go, there's all these like little like famous blues joints where like famous people have performed, and just everyone's just like about the music. That's what it felt like. It was just really, really cool. I just was not expecting that.
It's interesting enough because I think Austin is I think it picked up along with Florida or Miami, the most number of people as we're kind of, I guess, internal immigration within the US. I think people that left San Fran went to Austin because of the lower taxes, great standard of
Interesting.
living. So something for you to consider if you do decide if you want to move there. What's an insecurity that you have? Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
That I might not be able to accomplish everything I want to accomplish.
And where do you see yourself in the next 3 to 5 years, both professionally and maybe personally?
I definitely see myself okay, so I think my vision is like I want to have like 6 months. I want to be based out of the US. So like 6 months in the US, and then I want the other 6 months to be in India. And when I'm in India, I basically want to be doing a lot of the work that I'm figuring out right now. I think that would just be the perfect scenario. And I want to be working for myself as well. Like I want to be able to kind of like, again, that switching between different types of work, like kind of being able to do this work with like NGOs and social enterprises, but being so good at it that you just walk in 3 days a week for maybe 6 months and boom, like they've got all the foundations they need, they've got their strategy, they've got all the system, they don't even need you anymore. You're just like going in and doing that. And then you're balancing that out with like, I've always had this thing of like in the evenings will be like my creative time. Like I'll have a little like studio, I'll go in, I'll create like incredible music, and then I'll be in India. And so like, I don't know, there's like a lot of things where I'm kind of, that's sort of my vision, I think, in probably in 3 years time.
3 years, you're going to give yourself that.
Yeah, totally.
So I will check in with you in 2024 to see if you made that happen. So I guess related to that, how would you want your friends and family to, describe you in like a personal legacy statement? So like, how would you want them to remember you by?
These are really good questions. This is what's coming up. I think I'd want them to remember me as a safe space. So like, yeah, just someone where like you can just show up as you, and you know that you're going to be loved no matter what, literally no matter what. Like, I think that's what I want to be for people in my life.
Great answers. I was thinking if I should do this first, but I'm curious as someone in the creative space, because it's not often talked about, but like money seems to be kind of like a taboo subject. So what are your thoughts around money, and like, how do you look at investing? Share whatever you feel comfortable sharing, but just the topic of money.
So interesting. Okay. I think it's really fascinating that money is such a taboo topic.
Especially in the South Asian community.
Totally. And I'm so curious about why that's come about. I was listening to I think it was like a podcast a few weeks ago where the person was like, money is love. I was like, okay, what? He's like, yeah. So essentially how you feel about money is how you feel about receiving love. So if you're feeling some sort of blockage around that, some sort of shame or guilt about wanting money, about receiving money for something that you have provided that rightfully deserves love, then there's some sort of something going on within you that feels like, oh, I'm not unworthy of love. And that kind of shifted my entire way of thinking about money. I think I've been somewhat lucky because I've always like had a pretty like chill relationship with money. Like I haven't necessarily felt any guilt or anything like negative related to it. But I think openly admitting that you want it, that I want it, is like it's still such a taboo. But I think when you position it that way, like it's just a way for you to receive love and recognition for something you've done that you really care about. That changes everything. So I totally have like money goals. Like I 100% have like huge money goals. And I think for me, there's a spiritual element to it. There's a spiritual element of like clearing out all of the parts of me that think that I don't deserve that love in the form of money. And all of it's like that internal work. And the money is just sort of like, all right, great, as a result of the work that I've done internally. But that's how I see it.
And do you have like specific plans on like like what you plan on investing with money, or like, yeah, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I feel like this is one part of my life where I just like haven't been as proactive about getting educated on it. Like I think I've taken a very like, again, it's good. Like I think the most common form of investment for brown kids is real estate, and I've sort of gone down that path, which is great. But I'm so curious about like what are all the ways in which the money that I'm earning could be working for me in a more powerful way. And I just, one part of my life I just don't have any, I don't have that knowledge, and I think it's a gap. Like I want to be able to empower myself with that.
I'm super fascinated with the topic of money, only because I had a bad relationship with it when I was younger. I was very bad with it. And I think it's kind of learned from maybe parents or just the community in general around, like, there's a lot of people I feel like in the South Asian community that live a life that they can't necessarily afford because they don't, you know, maybe you can afford like a nice house, but instead maybe live in a condo so you can save or just put less financial pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
So like there's a movement that I follow called the FIRE movement, FIRE capitalized, and it stands
Okay.
for financially independent, retire early. It's only because there's a couple of Canadians and Americans that kind of are big in that movement, and they're all about kind of, you know, save at least 50% of what you make, invest in like certain things so that, obviously it's what it stands for. So their definition of retirement or freedom is not freedom like typically associated with the retirement age of 65, but basically retirement is basically ownership of time. So doing what you want when you want, and money is a tool to enable that. So just, spend spend money on things, but be very selective about what those things are. Don't just frivolously kind of throw it away and invest. So I was just, yeah, curious about that,
I've
about your
never
thoughts on.
do that. That sounds amazing.
Yeah. So, and one area you should look into is, like you said, real estate is like, I think real estate, whether it's the South Asian community or not, but I think it's like the thing that's easily understandable. But I think in the next 10 years, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and information about it. And something I'm learning about now is um, buying businesses. So in the next like 10 years, there's going to be like a huge shift in like, um, baby boomers who want to sell their businesses. Their retirement is literally sitting in their business, but they need people to buy them. Or because of COVID, there's businesses that are shuttering down, but they have value. But, sometimes it's easier to shut down a business versus sell it. So there's so many opportunities. Like what in like the last 10 years, I've seen so much information and courses and seminars on real estate. I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see that around um, buying businesses. So we'll see,
That's
like based on
brilliant.
what I'm hearing. So yeah,
That's brilliant.
because for me, one thing is I've started a business, but if I were to do it again, like with all the knowledge as being an operator, I would buy a business where somebody's figured out all the hard stuff at the beginning, and I'm just running and optimizing the business so it grows better, and like I don't have to do like
Wow.
so. It's just,
I've never heard of this. I love this. This is
yeah.
such a brilliant idea.
If you look it up, I mean, it's not an original idea. It's just like a bunch of information I'm pulling from different places. But if you just look it up, you'll kind of see it'll become more of a trend, I would say. I anticipate.
Nice.
We'll see. So I'm just, because for me, it's like if I can buy something, somebody's already figured out the hard stuff. I just have to tweak it a bit, and then it's generating enough money that I can, I don't need a lot of money, but enough that I can sustain a life for me and my family, and like, you know, um, just enjoy life without like over stressing. Why not? Like,
Yeah.
do things like you're describing, like travel or like give to others, etc. So yeah.
What was the business you started before?
Oh, the business I'm currently running is called Continyou Care. Like we sell software to like retirement and long-term care homes. It's not a sexy space, but I like that it's not a sexy space because you don't have to like you can kind of do things under the radar. So yeah, that's what I've been up to
Is
for.
that what you're doing full time?
Yes, I've been doing that for the last like 7 years, I would say. Yeah.
So you're totally a creative. Like you created a business.
I guess so. I guess I don't see it as creative, but I guess I am creative in that way. Yeah.
Holy crap. That's freaking incredible. How long have you been running it for?
Oh, sorry, 7 years. Like me and a
7.
business partner. Yeah, for about 7 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing.
But like I was saying, it was a very long grind in the beginning, where you want to give up, or you're even like, because you're measured against other companies or like how fast all these companies are growing, but you just kind of have to stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Because what success what you might view as success, somebody might not, or like they might be like whatever. But I think just being able to run something and stay alive for that long, in the climate of like running businesses, I think a feat in itself. So happy about that, like for at least ourselves. So
Yeah,
we'll kind of see where it kind of goes in the future. But yeah,
that's amazing.
yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So in terms of, I know, like we just talked about a bunch of things around like learning. Seems like we're both like very, we like to learn new things and kind of educate ourselves. So what is your source of kind of consuming information? Like, do you listen to podcasts, books? And if so, what's a book or a podcast that you can kind of consumed that's had an
Ooh.
impact on you?
I'm trying to think. I feel like I get information from all sorts. Okay, I think what I decide to work on learning wise is related to my inner work. So whatever I'm deciding to focus on at this point in time that like I want to improve, whether it's in terms of like my mental programming or whatever it is, like that's I'll kind of like dive really deep into that and just try to get knowledge from like from wherever. So for instance, like one of the things I'm doing at the moment is like, how do I rewire my brain so that I'm not so basically I have this like really strong sense of self-love and I'm not constantly attaching my worth to like achievements. So that's something I'm doing at the moment. So like some of the stuff I'm doing is like Mind Valley, which I love. Have you heard of Mind Valley?
No, I have not.
Really, really good. It's like this platform for personal development. So it has dedicated courses for different ways to develop personally. And one of them is like a self-hypnosis course. So I'm doing that at the moment. Books wise, there's so many. What was the question? Which one has impacted you the
Oh no, like you can just any kind of, I guess, information source. So I know some people prefer books, some people prefer podcasts. I used to be a book person more so, but I think since COVID and like the gym's closed down, my exercise became walking, and walking is boring without something. And I was trying to
Yeah.
listen to music, so I started listening to podcasts. Now I'm like, I love podcasts, which is even why I started this podcast.
Nice.
So I was just curious what your source was. So it seems like you like it's almost like course based, and it just depends on like what kind of things you're looking to improve at the moment. So it just varies.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Um, if you had a chance to go back in a time machine and sit down and talk with 16-year-old Amrita, like what would you say to her?
Respect yourself. I think so around my late teens I had like depression and I I think I would just tell myself that like no matter what, like none of this stuff, like I used to obsess about my grades, the way I looked, whether like people found me attractive, and like it was just such a dark place to be in, and I was thinking about everyone else and what they thought of me other than what I thought of me. So I think my only advice would just be like find some way of seeing the worth in you every day.
As someone kind of outside looking in, how did you know that you like were depressed versus kind of like a prolonged sadness? Like, how were you able to tell the difference between the two?
I think I only knew after I came out of it, to be honest, because I was just like it's so weird. Like my memory of those years is very warped. And so coming out of it, when I look back, I just remember some of the things I used to like. I used to go back home after school, turn the lights off, and just like lie down under the blanket and cry for literally the whole evening. And I just thought that was what, like, I didn't even think it was weird or like different. It was such a dark place to be in. And I didn't label it depression back then because I didn't know what it was. I suspected that's what it was. But when I tried to go and like, I guess, speak to people in the community about it, they were just like, just be happy. And I'm like, oh, but I'm unable to. Like, what do I do? Like, shit, is it me? Like,
So like, did your parents not notice like this change in behavior of you, like kind of avoiding them or kind of being in the dark, like they didn't find it unusual or they never talked to you about it?
I think they didn't understand it. I think they couldn't wrap their head around it. And I was anyway a very like introverted kid, so I would go and spend a lot of time in my room anyway. So, and I think I hid it pretty well.
Mm.
But also, yeah, like I just didn't. I think people around me didn't know what to do or like what to think or what to say. Like it's just such a, again, like one of those taboo topics, especially like in our culture, where it's just like almost like a shame to be depressed. There's some weird thing associated with it, where it just becomes a lot harder for young people to be able to openly just come out and say like, hey, yeah, I know I have everything and you think that I should be happy, but I'm not able to right now. Like, let's talk about it. Like there's such a block there. Yeah.
Who is one person in the global Tamil community that you admire and why? And who's somebody that's non-Tamil that you admire and why? Money can be hard to come by, but here is a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
You know what? I love this question. I would say Abdul Kalam.
Who's I've never heard? No.
Like, he used to be president of India.
Okay.
And he grew up in Tamil Nadu, so Rameshwaram, and like super humble beginnings, and then became the president of India. And like who he was as a person was just the most pure, loving soul. Like he had a vision for India that was so unified, so like rooted in spirituality and morals, and yet so large and so like, you know, we can develop as a nation. Like we can have hope and faith in ourselves. Like it was just one of those leaders where you're just like, oh my goodness, like you are just the most incredible human. So I think to this day, like he's like my ultimate role model, and he's a Tamil man. Like how cool is that? Like I just think he's sensational. He passed a few years ago. But I still have like all of his, I have like a bunch of his books about how he's just written about like a vision for India. Like how do we start as the young people in India, how do we start educating ourselves in a way that we're not just following the doctor, lawyer, engineer route? Like we're encouraging our young people to think outside of the box, think about what their vision and purpose is, like build innovation, like bring some joy and like all of that stuff. Like he's just the coolest person.
And how about non-Tamil?
This answer varies every time I think about it. I'm obsessed with Nelson Mandela at the moment. I'm like reading about his life and the sort of leader that he was. And also similar to Abdul Kalam, the way that he was able to hold a vision for a country and as a result of that hold himself to such high standards and become a person who was like able to lead. Like there's something about the way he led that I find so inspiring.
Well, that's kind of a good way to segue into the final part of our podcast, which is the game that I like to call Creator Confessions. So I want to say a bunch of statements, and you're going to kind of give me, it's meant to kind of be a speed round. So first thing that kind of pops into your head.
Okay.
Ready? Awesome. Yeah. Favorite Tamil food?
Roti.
Something that scares you?
Oh my God, green lizard.
That's random. Favorite show you're watching?
Favorite show, Frasier.
Favorite Tamil movie?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. Randomly, oh my God, Padayappa, for sure.
Yes, good choice. A place you're itching to travel to after the pandemic is over?
India.
Fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to?
This is so hard. There's like a bunch. I'm going to say Adi. So one of my mates, Adi in Sydney, is like a young Tamil. He writes really well. Like he writes lyrics beautifully and he sings and also raps.
Okay. Favorite childhood memory?
All right. These are hard. Oh, I would have to say when my little brother was born.
Okay, so you must love your brother. Okay, that's good. Pet peeve?
When people gulp water loudly.
Never heard that one. A person or celebrity that you look up to?
I'd say Abdul Kalam.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have?
This is what's coming up for me, that I wasn't more vocal about my love for India.
Age you want to retire by?
I don't ever want to retire. I just want to do stuff that I love always.
Celebrity whose life you want to experience for one day?
Literally no one. I can't think of anyone.
That's a good answer. No. Okay. And finally, a public service announcement that you want to leave our audience with. So it can just kind of be,
Cool.
a final message to any creators in general, maybe some fellow musicians out there, or just, maybe something you're working on, whatever you want to leave them with. This is your chance to kind of finish this podcast off strong.
I think what I want to say is that like everything is internal. And I'm realizing that now. And I think the more you can tune into like what your voice is and what you truly want, and literally what you're called, like that thing that makes your soul just like burst into life, the more you tap into that and into you, your whole life just transforms and you realize what is truly important. And I think living life from that perspective is the sort of life that when you're like 80 and you look back, you're like, yeah, I did good. That was solid. So I think the biggest thing is like realizing everything's internal and dedicating time every day to cherish and to spend time with who you are and to honor that.
Perfect. Well, that was a great way to kind of end off the podcast. I felt like we talked about so many a variety of topics. We talked about.
I loved it. So good.
It was a great conversation. You were very interesting to talk to. I don't
Likewise.
mean that. Yeah. So if somebody listened to this podcast was like, wow, they were inspired by you, they just want to connect with you, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
So I've taken a bit of a break from Instagram, but I'm planning to get back on later in the year, around like September. So I would say Instagram DM, Amritha.Shakti.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you again, Amrita, for jumping on and just sharing. I felt like your answers are very kind of, they're very honest. So I loved your answers. And I appreciate you kind of taking time. And for the audience, thank you guys, as always, for tuning in and look forward to the next episode.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.